Welcome back to Peanut Gallery. We are doing a Peanut Gallery special thanks to an election being called. And so with us today, we have Karen Vecchio.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yay!
Thanks, Peanut Gallery.
So if you're new to the Peanut Gallery, or you happen to be watching just because you get curious because it's an election, our goal here really isn't to be the same as every other interview that you're going to have. Our goal really is the same as it's going to be if you go back through our videos. Last year, everything we've done is about telling stories, about building community. And so we're not going to sit here and grill you about everything. We have some questions. We're hoping for some good conversation. But that's our goal tonight because I really think, and we're going to say this on every episode, but who the person is that we send to Ottawa matters more than what they say to us. And I think character and integrity and all those things matter more. And so we're going to share stories. And so we're going to talk to hopefully all the 4 candidates. And so today it's your turn and we are thrilled that you were in. And so first of all, I want to say this on behalf of all of the constituents in our little area. And that was a big word.
That was good.
Really,
well done.
That was well said.
You can tell I did.
Very impressed.
Should have taken advanced English. I know. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service. This last year cannot have been easy.
I don't know if you've looked underneath, but there's a few extra hairs, a few extra grays in there. And you know, you're absolutely right. COVID-19 and starting in March of 2020, my life changed. Yeah. My staff's lives changed. Yeah. My husband's life changed. And Canadians' lives changed. It has been really sometimes overwhelming. Oh, yeah. But that's why I work with some of the best people that I work with, whether it's working with Jeff Urich or our mayors or working with the people in my office. Yeah. Our job was really to pull together and help try to get people through these really tough times. And I am so honored to work with the people I do because they're compassionate and empathetic. And we seem to have got the job done. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. Right. But we really did do our best.
Well, let's talk about the things that weren't perfect. I'm just kidding. Okay, so before we get into it, because one of the big questions I want to ask you is why would you run again despite all this? But before we, wait, patience now. Patience. I'm the interviewer. Okay. I want to know how you got into politics. Like who is Karen Vecchio outside of seeing you on posters or at events? How did you get to this region? And kind of how did you then get into politics?
Well, thanks very much. And I was born in Sparta. I'm a native of Sparta, Ontario. Grew up on a turkey and pig farm in Sparta. Really? Yeah, lived our RR number 1 Sparta, so it's known as Jamestown. There were 6 of us, 4 siblings and 2 parents, no other neighbors around, 22,000 turkeys and 2,000 pigs. That's been my life. So,
okay.
So
was Patrick one of those pigs?
Oh my gosh!
Hey,
that was good. So maybe we'll have to edit that part out.
Yeah,
we'll see.
But you know, I grew up in southwestern Ontario, growing up in Sparta, and this is where I've always lived. This is where my roots are. My family's here, and you know something. After this last year, I still want to do this job and work with what we've got here, and we have an amazing group here. We have amazing communities. I represent 10 different communities. You know, from the city of London to Rodney to Stratfordville and everything in between, and up in Thorndale, and you know, there's still lots of work to be done. And if anything, this has actually motivated me, knowing that there are gaps in there. During this pandemic, we saw some gaps. Right. And I have that experience to continue to say, listen, this is what I've seen. This is what I've experienced. This is what who I've spoken to. And have that voice and continue to share some of these stories from what's happened in the last year and a half and then what's happened all the rest of the time. Right. I got involved in politics. My family's always been one of those families that at 6 o'clock, my dad would come in from chores, we'd turn on the TV and would watch CFPL, Channel 10 News. That was a big deal.
Because there was only 3 options. Was that City TV or CBC?
No,
That's what
I lived in, we couldn't even get CBC. What? So living where I lived, we could get Channel 10, we could get Channel 12 and Channel 24. So if I wanted to watch Peach Street TV, I could get that. But I didn't actually get a lot of Canadian television. Only at that time, I don't remember getting the CBC, but only in... the discussions with my family at the table, watching the news, watch what happens in the community. And then people like John Wise. So, you know, you can talk about how long we've had some phenomenal politicians here, but John Wise, I worked on his campaign with my grandfather. I would have been very, very, very young, but my grandfather would be out there putting up signs, out there, you know, getting some fundraising done. And then from there, it was even in school. Like, you know, I was on student council in high school and public school, and I've been on community associations, whether it's the Lyndhurst Community Association that I was on about 10 years ago when I had a little bit more time, but associations to try to help our community improve. And that's the type of stuff I've always been involved. So after working with Joe Preston, this is how I got involved more at the federal level.
Okay. So tell me a bit about Joe. What are some of the things that you loved? Because you worked with him for a few years.
I sure did. 11
How
years.
did working with him inspire you to take in that position? Because for a lot of us, like when I look at it, yeah, I'd love to be able to have my opinion heard. I don't know if I'd want to run. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I want people to listen to me, but you guys go through a lot. Like the pressure on that role is huge. So what did you see in Joe in those 11 years that you kind of went, I want to step into this?
I think there's two things. First of all, the priority being the people. Always ensuring that there is customer service. And both Joe and I come from hospitality sectors. So I always worked for tips, right? So the better you served, the more you earned. And that's the way I look at it is I look at this job that I am working because at the end of the day, that's what the voters expect. They're my customers, they're my clients. And so my job is to ensure that they are being taken care of. That's what my job is supposed to be.
Do the tips look a little different now?
Perhaps. I worked really hard, though.
Just verbal tips?
Yeah,
there are some things you could do better.
I get a lot of verbal tips, But it's about the community. And I think the thing is, I speak to people and the love for this community that we all share. Right. What you guys are doing, what we see our community festivals doing, and all of those things, it's about making our area a better place. Right. And I think with the groups that I have been able to be intertwined with and working with, I have that ability to kind of take that to the next level.
I love it. I read something the other day I thought was really cool. They said, we get lost in these world headlines that are terrible often. And they said, write your own good headlines for your community. Father loves his child again.
Yeah.
Father serves here. Person cares for neighbor. All those things. Like and in our community, there's a lot of people who do that. And they're not the ones who make the news, because typically that's not newsworthy. But there are incredible people in this community who are sacrificial, who are caring for each other. We really do have an amazing community to live in.
Absolutely. I look at all the people that, the shelter in St. Thomas, for instance. Sandy Westaway was doing that. Well, that's a retired person that had come from the school board and then continues to give 10 more years back to the community. That's kind of what we see in our community, are people that are already there who care and want to do more. And I think that we see this throughout the entire riding. People want that feeling of community, that feeling of friendship. And I think what we have seen, there's lots of head issues, or lots of world issues, but always let's look in our backyard first.
Right. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So you wanted to get into politics. What drove you to the Conservative Party? And I know after I'm going to ask you a little bit to define that. Maybe you can merge these two together, but why be a part of the Conservative Party? What is it about that you feel like relates best to who you are and also stands up for Canada the best?
I get that question a lot. Why are you Conservative? Especially being a woman. A lot of people would be very surprised that I'm a woman and a Conservative. I used to walk into events and they would say, oh, hello. And then they'd assume I'm going to the Liberal table. I'd be like, no, I'm Conservative. It happened all the time. Everybody assumed that any politician had to be Liberal. That's not the case. I believe in fiscal responsibility first. I'm very much that the engine that gets this country going is our economy. And I believe that we have really good things that can happen when we have a strong economy. So for all of those social safety nets that we need, that our communities need, those things can be there when we have an engine that works. And that's why working in our small businesses, looking at our community, even going up and looking at the mechanics. I know the mechanics is just a few meters up here, really, and just making sure that we can ensure that they have an ability to run a strong business and things of that sort. That's the type of work that I think is really important. So the fiscal responsibility is one. But I also look at choice, and I look at some of the choices that as Conservatives we have. We have free votes. So I can go out there and speak to people and understand. For me, it's about personal choice. It's about, how do I want my children to raise my children? Childcare is always a huge issue in Canada. And growing up exactly where we are today, an institutionalized childcare probably wouldn't work here in Mount Salem. There's lots of people that need childcare, but sometimes it can be that neighbor. It can be a friend. It can be a grandparent. It could be somebody taking care of 5 children, or it could be in a much more structured area as well. We have lots of great programs that are available. But I believe in choice as when we raise our children, and that's something that's very important to me as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you look back your last 4 years, what would you say are some of the biggest highlights? And then follow that up, because everybody loves talking about the good stuff. What are some of the things that you feel like, man, I wish we could have gotten this accomplished?
Okay, so I would say one of my highlights, let's go back actually last May, I've really worked a lot when it comes to domestic violence, sexual exploitation, and issues on women. I look at everything I do, but that's one thing that to me is very, very important as well. And so back in 2020, there was funding that was under MAPI. It's measures against protecting, prostitution. So it's helping those women that are in prostitution. How did they get there? We know that about 95% of women in the sex trade are not there by choice. So there was some funding that was being taken away by the federal government. And this was something that, you get the London Abused Women's Centre, you get Courage for Freedom, all of these organizations that are calling out saying, stop, we need help and we've got nothing to do this. And we know that numbers are climbing when it comes to human trafficking and sexual exploitation. So I decided to take the bull by the horns because that's kind of what I'm doing. I pulled together all of the opposition parties. So I worked with the NDP, who is Lindsay Matheson up there, and I worked with the Bloc, so the lady from the Bloc from Shefford out in Quebec, and I worked with the Green Party. Actually, it was Jenica Atwin, who is now actually the Liberal Party, but I worked with her as well. And we brought together, the four of us joined together as opposition parties, calling on the government to bring this money back. And I led that. And I led that with a lot of support because when I said I wanted to do this, my party was very on board saying, you go for it, Karen, we know. And the community was really on board. But getting all of the opposition parties to work together on something like this is really important. I know we turned the dial on that. I know that we got the minister listening and we turned the dial. That is something that I'm very proud of because I think the one thing I've shown in Parliament is my ability to work with others. I've had lots of opportunities to work with opposition parties, to work with the government. And for me, I think I'm pretty darn good at listening. There are times that maybe I should be listening more, but I think I'm pretty good at trying to figure out what is the balance. Sometimes I say that's because I'm a mother of 5 and I have 5 children that are so different. I can't. You never see anything so different than my 5 children, and so I kind of look at that and take those skills and put them into my work. Some of the bad things. Were you wanting to know what some of the lowlights were?
Because it kind of leads into the follow up question. Why would you run again, knowing like some of the issues coming up are huge? And when you talk about the vaccine passports that are coming out, all those this is not going to be an easy term.
No.
Not that there ever really was, but it's kind of one of those where we're coming out of 18 months of chaos and hell for a lot of people. And you look at the world that's going around. We've talked a little bit about Afghanistan. We talked before that. We look at Haiti and what's happening, and those are just 2 of many. And so then I want to know, what are some of the things that you're like, man, I wish we could have accomplished, or what are the things that are driving you to say, no, I want to run again because we want to finish this?
Gosh, there are so many things when you say we want to finish this. And I don't think there's anything that we can say start to finish, because I think a lot of times it's taking sometimes even that first step. Right now, some of the things when I look at seniors, I know the seniors have had it really hard. We look at the people who have been isolated for the last 18 months and we talk about long-term care homes, what that looked like. Those were absolute failures. We can sit there and say, yeah, we've got a problem here. One thing that for me is, how can we ensure that we have enough funding so that we can support and have proper principles and best guides of practices and best practices across this country? So I look at those types of things and think we haven't accomplished what we needed to accomplish. So it's those types of jobs that aren't finished that we need to work on. Now, long-term care, a lot of that's provincial, but at the same time, what is the federal funding? What can we do to be an ambassador across this country and do more? Those are things that are really important for me. In our own communities, we are, of course, we've got 2 hours to Toronto, 2 hours to Windsor, and the borders, we're right beside the U.S. border. So agriculture is very, very important to me there as well. And so when it comes to, there's the 2 sectors, you've basically got your supply managed sector, and then you've got your sector when it comes to the free markets. And I think that we have not done a great job when it comes to the free markets and ensuring that we are getting our product over there and negotiating. I know that we've had a lot of stumbles. China, of course, just a couple years ago, whether it was beef or whether it was pigs, there was lots of bans, canola being banned. So we have to make sure that we have open agreements with free countries. And those are the types of things that I think we could do better on and that I'll continue to work on.
Okay. So it is more of a personal question then.
Sure.
And I think, to me at least, one of our most crucial ones at this point, and that is the question, why should I trust you? And I'll give you a bit of a background, because anybody listening can be like, that's kind of a jerk question, right?
No, it's all good.
But there's a lot of us who are nervous. There's precedents being set in government right now that are a bit nerve-wracking.
Absolutely.
The way the vaccine is rolled out, the way that, and some of this is still in the rumor mill, and so we'll see which direction things go. But people are scared. They're scared about losing their freedom. They're scared about losing their livelihood. They're scared about the government forcing things into our bodies, despite the science. And we're all vaccinated in here, so I'm not an anti-vaxxer talking about this. I'm fully vaccinated, and that was my choice. And I to me, that's a positive. I think this vaccine is an amazing thing. But there is a lot of fear saying, like, which direction is government heading? We are a free country. That's part of what's made us incredible, and what's part of, really, I think, is a huge part of the Canadian identity. And so this election, I feel like, is more personal.
It's very personal.
Because the last 18 months, a lot of, my kids' events were taken away. My kids' schooling was taken away. This is very personal. And for us, I think we're a little bit lucky. We're out in the middle of nowhere a bit. And so we didn't face some of the same stuff. We weren't cramped in an apartment. We weren't cramped in a little house. Like, we have a couple acres out here, and we're rural enough that the kids can run on somebody's field if they really need to get out. But there's so many that suffered. And so the question of trust to me is big. And you can answer it however you want, but why should we trust you and Erin O'Toole in leading this country?
And thanks very much, because I think that is exactly what people are looking for. They're looking for someone that they can trust. For me, I think I try to, for my constituents, I try to give them the exact same accountability that I would give to my own husband. That this is a job that I feel that I have to always be honest, tell people how I feel. When people are asking me, they'll say, "Oh, you're sitting on the fence on an issue like this." A lot of times I'll say it's because I don't have enough information. I don't jump and immediately jump on a yes or no. A lot of times I want to look at the 360 of the entire issue. So for me, the reason that you can trust me, or the reason I feel that I'm trustworthy, is because I'm not a bandwagon person. I'm a person that actually sits down and gets deep into those conversations so we can understand things. I had somebody ask me a few years ago, if I wanted to get into politics, what would be the best course to take? And I said, psychology. And they're like, "Oh, you're supposed to say political science." At least the teacher whose class I was in who taught political science thought I should say that. But I really think it's psychology, understanding what makes people tick, understanding what's important to them. And in this last 18 months, we found exactly what is important to them. It is their freedom. It is the right to choose. It is that ability to earn money and have our children in a safe community and our parents safe. Those are things that are important. And for me, I would have to just say, when people ask me a question, they know that they're going to get, if they don't get a direct answer, they'll get an answer that I will say, "I am still figuring this out, though." Right. And I'm not the person that will say one thing to one group and something to the other just to appease. I'm not that type of person, but I will be honest and compassionate to their feelings. So I think the trustworthy thing is I've been accountable for the last 6 years to the constituents here. I will continue to be accountable, and that's my moral values. That's how I was raised. I was raised by my mom and dad, and they're two of the kindest people I've ever met in the world. Sometimes too kind, I think. But that's just the way we should all be, and that's just the belief. Those are my beliefs. Be kind to one another and do good things.
Peanut gallery question here.
Yes, sir.
Kind of to go along with trust. Hey, hi from the peanut gallery.
Hi.
Yeah, here we are. Okay, so we're getting to know you by conversation.
Yeah.
We don't have an opportunity to sit down with Erin O'Toole.
Absolutely.
Why do you trust him? And what sort of things can you point to that we as people looking at, because Canada's weird in the sense of how we elect. Like, you're going to represent us, and then the Conservative Party, you guys are going to pick who the leader is. But why would you choose him?
So that's a great question, because a lot of people have said to me, we don't know O'Toole. And I'll always say, listen, over the last 18 months, it's been really hard to get any airtime, to get to know who this person is. And I think over the last 10 days of this campaign, he's done a really good job of getting out there. But this is a man that when I went to Parliament in 2015, I'm a newbie. I'm walking through the halls, and I knew I had some questions on foreign policy, because foreign policy really wasn't my strong suit. So who did I go to? I went to Erin O'Toole, because he was the shadow minister. The next thing I know, we're having a chocolate milkshake at McDonald's, and we're having this just really solid conversation on what some of our foreign affairs policy looked like. And that's just the kind of guy he is. Instead of saying, well, here, just email me like a lot of other people say, he's like, come, let's go. Do you want a drink? I said, yeah, I really would like a milkshake. He's like, you want a milkshake? Let's go. And I said, I really like those McDonald's milkshakes. And so he said, let's go. So we went there. And I think it's that type of man. I know that he cares. I've seen the way he treats his family. I know his wife and I've seen his children. And I know his relationship with his father, with Mr. O'Toole. Unfortunately, his mom passed away many, many years ago. But I'm looking at a person that the word honorable suits him. It really, really suits him. He's defended our country as part of the Canadian Armed Forces. People will say, well, he wasn't fighting here, wasn't fighting there, but he did make that choice to join the Canadian Armed Forces like so many other individuals do. And the love for this country. I know when I speak to him, we have the same love for this country. And I really find, looking at our platform, this massive platform that we've put out, he was 87% of that platform came from within our caucus. So that is the 120 members of parliament that are working in our ridings across Canada. And at the end of the day, he's the guy that has to sign off on that. He listened to us all. We talked about these policies straight up and platforms straight up. And gosh, it was great to be heard.
Okay, so that would be my secondary question. What kind of level of, I don't know the right term.
It's all good.
But muzzling that, you as people in caucus would face, like in terms of, everybody has to toe party lines, and there's always the political aspect of trying to present a unified, leadership front. But one of the things that we've discussed is that it would have been nice during pandemic for some of that behind the scenes stuff to actually be a little bit more open.
Yeah.
So people could see that the difficult questions that I want asked were actually asked, and that the people answering them had trouble answering them, and that we could see that this debate was going on to humanize what we're all thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
So as you guys are preparing your platform, and as you're entering into the, what kind of level of, you've got to, I know to some degree it happens, I understand that, but how do you feel about your freedom to be able to just talk openly as who you are to your area? What is that like?
I'll be honest, I feel very, very strong in supporting Erin O'Toole. I feel very strong with our Conservative Party. And I love our party because I just look at it. First of all, I look at Elgin, Middlesex, London as like the petri dish of Canada. We've got a portion of the city of London, which we know is spiking above 400,000. We've got the city of St. Thomas that is also really growing. Elmer, Mount Salem. I was like, keep on saying Mount Salem every day here. All of these groups coming together. It's really, really important that I understand the diversity of places. And so that's why I look at Elgin, Middlesex, London as being very diverse in views, diverse in culture, and because we have such a huge area that we're representing. I personally don't feel muzzled. I really don't. Anything I would say in caucus is something that I would say to the public. I wouldn't say I watch my words, but sometimes it's your job is to listen as well. And so when we're talking about really difficult things like conversion therapy, when we're talking about those types of things that a lot of people want to talk about, we really have robust conversations because I have spoken to the people in my community, and that's what the members of parliament for other ridings are hearing as well. We have to have these conversations because if I'm not sharing the thoughts of my own constituents, then I'm not listening. So I can tell you, I'll say, this is what I'm hearing from this group, or this is what I'm hearing from that group. And that's what's really important. At the end of the day, it's trying to say, here's all the information we have. Now, how do we approach this so that there's a balance, that we are not segregating one group over another? Those are really important conversations to have that we have all of the time. I've been working on the leadership group with Aaron. I've his deputy House leader since he's become leader. And so I was part of the negotiating team on looking at what are the things that we're doing in the House of Commons, what bills are coming forward, what's going on in the Procedures and House Affairs Committee, which is basically the mother committee over the House of Commons. And I had the opportunity to do a lot of work there with Aaron. And gosh, his leadership, his style of leadership. We have leadership meetings every morning at 8, and he listens, and that's what he does. He's not there to tell us what we're doing that day. He wants to hear what we heard last night, and that's what I love about it. Does that give you a good answer?
Yeah.
Really long, eh?
Well, no, I would rather we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't. If I have an opportunity to ask somebody who would know, in a personal way, and you can give me your personal account. I mean, we're talking about trust, and you're the person that we're going to trust with our vote. So then you're going to decide who that person that's going to sit in the big chair is, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that matters.
Oh, 100%. You know, I've always said with Aaron, though, there is something special about him. I was having a bad day probably about 6 months ago and sitting in a leadership meeting, and my mom called, and he looked at me because he could see a tear come in my eye. And honestly, after that, within 5 minutes after our meeting, the first thing he did was find me and say, okay, what's going on? Do you need any help? That's the kind of guy he is. He really cares about all of the members he works with as well. Yeah.
Okay, so this is just because I'm kind of curious about politics. So this isn't on your script or anything.
Oh, great.
What's it like just starting? Like, what you say your first time walking through there? Like, how intense is that transition? Now, you have to be secretary or whatever that title is for Joe Preston. So I guess you would have had a bit more back the scenes. But what is that like to transition to? Like, one day I was just Karen Vecchio, and then all of a sudden now I'm representing an entire riding and.
Well, I'm always still just Karen Vecchio. I always think I'm Karen from here. That's what I do. But it is overwhelming. When you walk into the House of Commons and you are actually able to walk on the green carpet in the House of Commons as a member of Parliament, it is wow. You're sitting there and thinking, I am in this area now to represent all of the people from Elgin, Middlesex, London. So it is an honor. You can be overwhelmed. And you see big names there too. So like, you know, when we talk about people like Bill Blair, who's now the Minister of Public Safety, you know, I only knew his name from always being the police chief of Toronto. And, you know, honestly, with Justin Trudeau, because he's got that name, a lot of people, oh, it's Justin Trudeau. So even when I first saw him, you know, I didn't know him. I wasn't happy or anything, but I saw him and I was just like, I can see why some people would think, oh, because people sometimes do look at people as celebrities. Right. And so I saw a lot of people that were, wow, these guys are really smart or these guys are really accomplished. And then I realized I'm sitting amongst all of them. And hey, I have something to offer too. Right. And so I think it takes a little while to feel comfortable in your own skin, but you can't take too long because your voice needs to be heard and not allow other people who may have bigger portfolios or bigger profiles to outscore you. Your job is to be there and be a voice of just like the other 338.
Right, because we've talked about this often here at the church when we have debated how we feel about different guidelines coming out, how much easier it is on this side just to say you should be doing A, B, C, but to actually be on the other side like that is quite the transition to kind of go, no, now I can't just say somebody else should say this. Yeah. It's up to me to say it.
I think about a lot of the work. The working with Joe Preston for that 11 years was amazing for me because I got to work with seniors, people who were coming in and couldn't fill out their old age security, or people who were coming in and having problems paying their mortgage that month. So I've worked in a lot of situations like that. I've worked where we've tried to bring over married couple, or we've brought a wife over from another country or a husband that they have been married and they can't get them back to Canada. They were Canadian citizens and can't get them. So I've worked with their immigration files. So understanding and being empathize is huge. And so I'd say that those 11 years of that experience is probably the best setup I could have ever had. And I actually now said to my husband, every MP should have to work in an MP's office for 1 year just to understand the bureaucracy that people have to go through and how systems work. Right.
So if you were to envision your Canada, how would you describe your hope? Now, you're one of a bunch of people up there, and I get that.
Yeah.
But when you think of Canada, you think of our role in the world, you think of, and I know this is a huge question that we could talk for hours on, but describe for me a little bit of what your vision, your hope for what you would like Canada to become would be.
Well, one of the most important things to me is safety and security. I want to know that whether I'm walking down the streets of Sparta or walking down the streets of Toronto, that I am going to be safe. Right. That is something that's really important. And it's not just about violence, but it's also about discrimination as well. I believe in equality for all, and I believe in equity. A Canada to me is where it doesn't matter if I'm a female or whatever I am, that I'm going to have the same opportunity as everybody else, and that wherever I go, I'm welcomed. I think I don't want people to feel like they're coming to some place and not welcomed. I think that's what it's like for me. I always say I'm a little bit Pollyanna because I do want a better Canada. I want something where there is hope all of the time. Right. I've been working with lots of people with addictions, and the one thing that's missing in their lives is hope. And for me, hope gets you through a lot. And that's what I want. That's what I'd want to see. Canada with a vision, with hope, with opportunities, with the divisiveness where if we're going to disagree on something, that we can walk away and say, okay, that's all right. I appreciate where you come from. We don't always have to agree, but at least I appreciate where you come from and respect that you have the rights to your own opinions. We're far from that right now. Right. I want to get back there.
So then a couple policy questions.
Sure.
They're kind of loose, but things that matter a lot to us here. So the two things I'd like to I'm curious on your thoughts about mental health coming out of this pandemic. Prior to that, we were already keenly aware that the mental health of a lot of Canadians was struggling. Coming out of COVID, most regions are like ours, where we're seeing a lot of people struggling. And the resources just are not there. And I know it's not an easy fix, and you're not going to give me a one-sentence thing, but I'd be curious what you guys think we could do moving forward with mental health for Canadians. What does the Conservative Party stand for in regards to that?
So looking at the big level, one of the things that we've done is we've indicated mental health is one of our 5 top pillars of the Conservative Party. We've put in something, it's 911. You know how you have 911? Well, it'd be 988, a suicide line that if people are looking for help. It might seem like a simple, oh, well, that won't fix it. But sometimes people just need somebody to call.
Absolutely.
And that could be something like that. So that's a simple fix. Money is going to definitely be part of it. So there needs to be more funding. So we've said that we had increased the funding and specifically making sure that there's funding for mental health, but it's really on the ground. Right now, people are looking for help and they can't afford it if they don't have benefits, or there's waiting lists that are huge. We need to ensure that we have opportunities to decrease those waiting times and also have the resources. Our community has resources, but they're so small and their need is so much bigger. A few years ago, they said 1 in 3 Canadians suffer from depression. I know it's much, much higher than that. And those people who didn't suffer from depression before probably found themselves in during COVID. I can tell you that I have watched members of my own family suffer from depression, and it's really, really hard. I'm fortunate because I'm a tiger sometimes when it comes to taking care of my family. So I will continue to try to break down those doors. And when it comes to mental health, just saying, no, I won't let I'm not going to let that person be turned away. I'm going to just keep on pushing. And I know that everybody doesn't have an advocate. That is what we need to have in our communities. We need to have mental health advocates. I liked it when you see somebody on those streets that are homeless. To me, it's really important to start having those conversations. My husband laughs, and actually my son laughs, because I probably know when I'm walking in Ottawa, I know the people that are on those streets. I'm talking to them. And it's interesting because that little conversation ends up going a long, long way because, we talk about where you could go. And sometimes it's just that kindness that we need to provide to others. When you see somebody who is suffering, lend a hand. I think that's what we need to do as well. But we need to have the professional resources as well. I think we have to continue to support things like the Salvation Army and different organizations that are not-for-profits, supporting some of the mental health advocates that are around in this area. They need to have the supports there, but making sure that we can connect individuals to that mental health, because sometimes the biggest barrier is just getting that person that connection. And so that's why I say just sometimes lending a hand, sometimes just saying hello. And that may even just open up the conversation. I've spoken to a lot of people that are looking at peer-on-peer solutions, which I think is phenomenal, where you're working with people that perhaps at one time had addictions or were homeless, or people that just want to help out in the community. I think there's lots of things that we can do, and we take some of the best practices that we see from across Canada and implement those as a whole. All
right, second one, and I know we're going to be running out of time here. We probably are already, but housing is huge. So our little background, so we run, or are part of running a transitional housing thing in Elmer. It's awesome, super cool. The issue is we can't transition anyone. Because there's nowhere for them to go.
There's nowhere to go.
And I know we're not unique in that. That is a huge issue. Any thoughts from the Conservative standpoint? And again, I know I'm asking huge questions and giving you thoughts on housing and how do we do better to enable people to have safe and affordable housing?
Well, I was fortunate enough to work on the housing file for 4 years. Specifically, that was my file, and looking at the housing continuum. So that's everything from the homelessness and shelters all the way to the top dollar, the homes that you're looking at. A lot of the problems that we have right now is development. So sometimes it might be, sometimes it won't be an area that needs to be developed, and the municipalities just may not have the funding to be able to do that. Sometimes it's restrictions that we may see. Right now, what we have looked at is we know that there's a whole bunch of government buildings that can be used that are not being used, that can be transitioned into perhaps some sort of affordable housing or housing supports that we can do that. So one of our things is that 15% of the real estate owned by the federal government is going to be put into housing to ensure that we can help with those. There's lots of things when it comes to mortgages. The foreign buyers might not seem, you're thinking if you're homeless, how does the foreign buyers policy impact me? Well, it does, because we have to look at that whole continuum. And if one of the rungs on that ladder is broken, then there's nowhere to go. Right. And if one of those parts of that ladder is over, like just filled up, a lot of people that are trying to go from geared to rent income into getting to their own apartment or getting into a house, we know right now that they can't afford because they're looking at $400,000 to get into a starter home.
Renting in Elmer for a one bedroom, you're dealing with $1,600-$1,700. How do you afford that?
You can't.
And then you think about people who are disabled or are on a pension or who you can't afford to even rent. It's not even just about not being able to buy. And it's heartbreaking, and you're stuck, and you're kind of like, I don't have a solution.
Yeah. So some of that has to do with supply. If there's one pair of shoes and 100 people want them, then you're going to get the highest bidder.
Yeah.
But if we make enough shoes, then we're going to be able to reduce that cost. So a lot of times it just has to go back to some of those simple principles of supply and demand. But we also know that over COVID, of course, we saw a lot of costs in construction go up by 3 times.
Yeah.
Lumber. Now, lumber's gone down about 70% now, but then they're still having a lot of issues. And actually, there's a surplus in some areas now of lumber, which is kind of strange. But all of those things, they have to be looked at. But housing is not just going to be a quick fix. I think what we need to look at is on the homelessness. We need to look at the wraparound supports through the Housing First initiative. When you get a roof over somebody's head, that is a start. That provides them the warmth. A lot of times that meal is included, but then we need to make sure that there's the mental health, the skills training, and all of those things on the next level as well. At the top tier, we need to make sure that we have tradespersons. I'm sure you've all heard about how many bricklayers are left in Canada and that they're all 75 and 80. We need to make sure that we're training these people as well. So I think a lot of times when it comes to skills development and education, we need to focus on those types of things. So housing can also look at the jobs and the apprenticeships through skilled labor. So it's not just one fix. It's about the whole different thing, from the labor issue to the cost of supplies to the banking to the development in those communities. All of those things have to be looked at. So at all levels of government working together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for humoring me. So it's great because those are things that for us out here, like we don't face a lot of the things that the big cities face. We have our own. We're rural, but those are ones that really in the last 2 years have impacted people. You've got the lockdowns, but then also housing went crazy.
Yeah,
and mental health was hard to get a hold of, and all these things are impacting people. And so now we got this election. I'm kind of like,
And during COVID, if you're living in an apartment, go get some fresh air out on your balcony if you have one.
Right.
People wanted that green space, and Elgin, Middlesex, London is filled with green space. Everybody has it's a lovely place. Some people have acres of land. Some people have a little stamp. At least they have their green space themselves. You don't see that in our big cities.
Right.
So we have found a lot of people have migrated from the Toronto GTA area or from the Kitchener area into our areas because of the quality of life that we have here.
right, I don't blame them. It's awesome here. We love it
We
here.
have quality
Love it
of life here. So.
Hey, any other questions from the gallery? You good? All right, that means I nailed it. Yes, good job, Oliver.
You nailed it? Awesome.
Probably you, more you than me, but all right. So with that, I want to say again, I just want to say thanks.
Are
Thanks
we all done already?
Yeah, we're it.
I could sit to you and talk to you for hours.
we could. I mean, what else do you want to talk? No, we really appreciate it.
No, and I appreciate you
taking the time
having
to come
me.
down and just even with a frank conversation and giving us answers. And
Yeah.
we know it's a short election and
It
you
is.
have a lot of work to do. And so I just want to say thanks. Thanks for the service. Thanks for being Karen. Thanks for modeling what you were saying, caring for your family. You know what?
Yeah.
For me, that's something that I really appreciate hearing.
Thank you.
Good job doing that. And for everybody else, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. And
Thanks to the
we'll
Peanut
see
Gallery.
you on the next one.
Thank you.